What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review, and this time we're going to take a look at Ghostbusters, directed by Ivan Reitman, the original 1984 classic. I'm going to make this review as short as I possibly can. I love Ghostbusters. Ever since I was a child, I was always in love with Ghostbusters. Both movies, for that matter, but I've always liked the first movie just that much more, because that first movie, to me, was a special experience when I saw it as a kid. It took the things that I enjoyed as a child, which was horror and comedy, and it mushed those two things spectacularly. This is like the perfect movie when it comes to like a horror, when it comes to a supernatural comedy in a way. But when you look at back at it now with a 2020 perspective, you can actually make a case that Ghostbusters is an undercover superhero movie because it has all the tropes of a superhero esque movie. You have these three colleagues who get ousted from their regular everyday job, and now they need to do something with now they need to do something with their time. Since they both have a common experience when it comes to the supernatural, they decide to form a group known as the Ghostbusters. And at first, they use it just to make some money, but when a big threat happens, they use their skills to now help save the city that they love. That's a basic premise for any sort of superhero movie, and Ghostbusters is to me, is an undercover superhero movie. When you look back at it now with a 2020 perspective, but how does this movie stand up on its own? It's still fantastic. The humor in this movie is still spot on. The performances in this movie are all memorable and just fantastic. So let's just break it down. The cast in this movie is iconically, legendary. Bill Murray as Peter Venkman, Harold Ramis as Egon Spangler, Dan Aykroyd as Raymond Stantz, and Ernie Hudson as Winston Zeddemore. These characters are iconic. They're fantastic. They're like the Fantastic Four. That's how good these characters are. You got Peter Venkman, who was like the lackadaisical public face of the Ghostbusters. You have Egon Spangler, who is the brains of the Ghostbusters, the man who's addicted to science. You got Raymond Stantz, who is the enthusiastic heart of the Ghostbusters, who believes in the paranormal and has researched the paranormal. And then you got Winston Zeddemore, who is the common day everyman, the eyes of the audience, who bounces off these three over the top personalities, and he fits in there like a glove. Now, I would have liked if the Zeddemore character would have came in maybe just a little bit earlier in the movie, and I think it would have been better if they would have stuck to the original script with Zeddemore already being associated with the three original Ghostbusters. That's just how I would have done it personally. But how the movie does it, it's still not bad. It's still really good. And when Ernie Hudson is inducted into the Ghostbusters team, he fits in like a glove. He does not feel like an odd man at all. He fits right in there with these three bombastic personalities. And I love the chemistry between these four actors. Now, the first half of the movie obviously focuses on Venkman, Spangler, and Ray, and the three of them, they work beautifully off one another. The chemistry between these three men is spectacular. You would have thought these guys have been friends for years, that they grew up together. That's how natural the dialogue is. That's just how smooth they bounce off one another. It feel You don't feel like you're watching a movie when you see these three guys on screen. You feel like you're watching just three friends just have conversations and talk about stuff and make jokes along the way. It's so naturalistic, and a lot of the credit has to go to Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd co-writing the script together. A lot of credit has to go to Ivan Reitman, the director, who just let these guys loose. And of course, the majority of the credit has to go to the actors for fitting into these roles like a glove. They're perfect. And when Ernie Hudson gets in as Winston Zeddemore, I like him in the roles too, and I like how he interacts with all three members of the Ghostbusters in his own little way. He and Ray have this really nice scene where they're talking about like the religious aspects of the work that they're doing. Then you have a funny scene where where Egon is explaining a Twinkie to Winston and what would happen if the Twinkie were to grow like into like 1,000 feet tall. It's funny stuff. It's great stuff, and his reactions are just great as well. Whew. Speaking of reactions, speaking of more performances, this movie is surrounded by an outstanding supporting cast. You have Rick Moranis, William Atherton, Sigourney Weaver, Annie Potts. All these actors are fantastic. Janine Melnitz, who is the Ghostbusters secretary, I love her. I think she has a good sarcastic attitude to her, and she doesn't take nothing from anybody, especially Venkman, because she's not afraid to speak her mind. And I like how this movie kind of sort of teases a little bit of a romance between her and Egon. You know, it kind of like breaks. It kind you kind of seeing Egon, not know how to react in sort of ways, so he just acts like Egon, just this stoic straight man, and who is socially awkward and just wants to be left alone with his science toys. It's good stuff. You got Rick Moranis, who's essentially playing two different personalities of the same character. He plays Louis Tully, who is like this neurotic type of person, and he's hysterical as the character. And then when Tully gets possessed by a Zool dog, he becomes the gatekeeper, and he acts all zany and manic, and he's great in the role. Rick Moranis is such an underrated gem. I wish he was still back in acting because he's so good. You have Dana Barrett. You have Sigourney Weaver as Dana Barrett, who is the love interest of Peter Venkman, and I like the character of Dana Barrett. And the movie's events are pretty much spurned off what happened with Dana Barrett at the beginning of the movie, where her kitchen gets possessed, and she sees a dog in her refrigerator, and she has to go to the Ghostbusters to try and help her. And I think Sigourney Weaver in this movie put on a great performance. I like how she is, at first and initially, she is not into Venkman whatsoever. She does not care for the man. She thinks he's an oddball, and she pretty much forces herself to interact with Venkman because she needs the help and wants to find out what's going on, to the point where she begrudgingly accepts a dinner date with him just so that she can get him out of his hair. But I do like how at the course of the movie, their relationship does feel natural and it never feels forced, especially when Dana gets possessed by the Zool dog, and now the stakes are in it personally for Venkman, because yes, now he has to save the woman he's in love with, his girlfriend, so to speak. So I like all that. It never feels forced. It feels natural. And there is a nice thing during the montage where the Ghostbusters are like starting to get established from New York City. You can see Dana Barrett slowly starting to appreciate the Ghostbusters and Venkman just a little bit more. So I like all that. It's very subtle. It's not in your face, and I enjoyed it. And Dana Barrett, she never really loses her focus either. Even though she starts to like Venkman, she's still just a little bit hesitant to actually love the guy because he's such a bombastic personality. And again, that all goes to Bill Murray in his performance as Peter Venkman. It's legendary and it's iconic. He's fantastic. Let me catch a breath. Now, let's get on to the production side of this movie. From an overall production standpoint, as I mentioned earlier, Ivan Reitman did a fantastic job directing this movie. He did a perfect balance of he perfectly balanced the humor and comedy, and he also balanced the scary moments of this movie, but he also mixed a lot of comedy into those scary moments, and it's a good blend. And I also like how he handled the action sequences, particularly near the end of the movie, where it's a big action set piece. And from 1984 standards, oh wait, I forgot. How could I forget Walter Peck, the human villain in this movie? William Atherton did a fantastic job at making Walter Peck as the most slimiest dick of a character, to the point where you get two dick jokes that are hilarious. You got Raymond Stantz calling him dickless, and then you got Venkman pretty much saying, this man has no dick. It's hilarious. And the entire climax of the movie is all because of Walter Peck trying to shut down the Ghostbusters because he feels that they're an environmental hazard. Walter Peck is an asshole, but William Atherton did a great job at portraying that asshole and making him memorable. Good stuff. I love it. Now back to Ivan Reitman. As I said, he did a good job at blending the comedy and the scary moments and making it all feel natural. And again, did a fantastic job of just letting his actors just run loose and just be themselves and give these characters their distinct personalities. And like I said, he directed his action set pieces really, really well as well, especially the climax of the movie with the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man and goes with the Gogarian in her supernatural human-esque form. Speaking of the third act, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. What can I say? It's iconic and it's great. And the fact that Ray, thought of Stay Puft as like the one thing that couldn't hurt them is hysterical. It's great. The entire climax of this movie is fantastic. Them taking down the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, Eventually, they save New York City and they save Tully and Dana from their possession by Zool. It's all great stuff. I love it a lot. Yeah, I love Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters is just a fantastic movie. This movie's got so many iconic scenes. You got the opening prologue in the library. You have the scene with Slimer in the ballroom, which is hysterical. And that whole hotel sequence when the boys are actually being Ghostbusters for the first time and they got to take down Slimer. It's hilarious stuff. And you got the little personal moments that are peppered all throughout this movie. The character relationships, their personalities. You know, Ray has his childlike enthusiasm for the supernatural, which makes him the heart of the Ghostbusters. You got Peter Venkman, who is the public face of the Ghostbusters. You got Egon, who is just deadpan stoic, and that's the best part of his character, is that he's so deadpan and so stoic that it makes what happens that much more funny, because these actors are all playing the roles totally straight, and that's where the humor comes from. You have this supernatural, you got this supernatural zaniness happening all around, and the four guys play it totally straight, and that's what makes this movie timeless and makes it stand out so much, is that everyone plays it totally straight, and you're in it, and it just makes the world feel real. And that's probably the best comparison. That's probably the best thing you could say about Ghostbusters, that it feels real, and it's backed by a talented cast in 1984 that came together, that gave this once in a generation classic of a movie that you can still talk about today, and that when you still watch it today, you still get that enjoyment you got out of it when you were a child watching it. So yeah, Ghostbusters to me is a perfect 10. I love this movie. I never get bored of it. So, with all that being said, let me know your thoughts on Ghostbusters in the comment sections down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.